I'm going to show you how to add something to a list. This time I'm going to use a GUI. I'll just basically run it and I'll show you how it actually works, and then I'll describe a bit more detail about what's going on. Here's the shell over here, and here is the GUI. I'll just drag it across. So how it works is whenever I enter a score, 23, a list will actually add another number. So the next one I'll add is 45. Each time I do that list is actually getting bigger each time. I'll just add one more, 78. Not only does it do that, when I've actually reached 4 items added to the list, what I'm doing there is I'm actually printing the list out using a for loop, which I've actually shown you before. So this lesson is going to be about continually adding to a list using a GUI, using the get method to get a variable from an entry box, using the length method to track the length of the list. In other words, how many items are in the list. So that's what we'll be talking about today. And let's go through this piece of code line by line. First thing is this is the GUI that's attached. So we have a title, we have a label, an entry box, etc. So I've just gone for the simplest GUI I could make. It just has a title, just basically says to enter a value. It has an entry box. When you click there's the button. Now we also, just a bit of a refreshment, that we need a to basically do this, we need to have a function, and this is how we're declaring our function. And we also need to call a function. So the function is called display output, and on the button I have a function called display output. So when I click that, it comes up here to display output, and it starts to implement this function. So that's basically how that works. I won't talk any more about the GUI because I want to concentrate on how we get a variable. Now the first line of code you'll see is this line of code here. It says int temp equals int temp entry.get. Now what this is a variable. It's an integer, so that's why I've got int. And I want to make sure that I'm turning this variable into an integer. So if I put in 25, it's going to recognize it not as 25 text but 25 integer, because we need to do some mathematical operations later on. Now, where this variable comes from, temp entry, is this little button, this entry button here, this entry widget here. It says temp entry. So whatever we put in here, it holds that, it grabs that variable, temp entry. Let's say we put 23. It's stored 23. We grab that variable, and we assign it to this variable, and then basically what we do then is we actually have a list. I've got a list declared here. It's an empty list. So we grab that variable, we assign it to here, then we put that variable here, so we amend that. So for instance, if we added 23, 23 would be entered into the temp, and therefore what would happen is that 23 would also be added to this list, which is called number list. It's a bit easier when we go through it, and I'll show you line by line of how it actually works. So that's the first thing we need to do. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to, so we're a bit clearer, I'm going to comment out this next section of code, this little bit of code here, because I want to focus on this. Alright. So what will happen now, and I'll run this, when I'll put some data in, I'll put 23 and 45 and 54 and a few other figures, and you'll see the list will get bigger each time. Here we go, so the shell's ready. I'm just waiting for the GUI to arrive, and here it is over here. So we'll just enter a value, 23. So the list is now contains 23. I'm going to add 35. Remember what's happening is that's in the temp entry widget. 35 is in there. When I click the button here, what will happen is that that function will be called. I'll grab what's in the button, what's in the entry box, and I'll assign it to this variable called int temp, and then that will add to the list. 35. I'll add 0, and I'll add 100. And I could keep on adding as well. So 103 and 134. So the list, as you see, will actually add. So that's the list, and I could just keep on going. Now I don't want to necessarily do that. What I'd like to do is get to a certain point, and when I've reached that point, when I've added a number of entries into the list, I'd then automatically like to print out the list for this example. So let me explain the next section of code. Here's another crucial point. Just this link, just this piece of code here. Now what this does, I can determine the length of a string or the length of a number of values in any sort of variable by using this this method here called length. So what I've done is I want to know how many things are in the variable called list, number list. And if it is equivalent to 4, then I'm going to print this out here. So what I'll do to make it a bit more explicit, I'm just going to write this now. I'm going to go print, and I'm going to write length number list. So each time it'll actually print out the length. So it'll stay as 1, then 2, then 3, and then 4, and then it'll print out the whole list. So yeah, we put length here, then we put what the value is that we're trying to determine the length of. Because I'm printing out the length, it'll print out a number here. So it'll return a number. Let's do this again. Here we go. So this time, I'll put the 34. So the list now contains 34. This will tell us we have one item in the list. 24, we've got 2 items in the list. 56, we've got 3 items in the list. 67, we've got 4 items in the list. Then it prints out the order of the list. There's a bit to take in there. Key thing is, this is the key method. We've got .get, which gets the variable what's ever declared before. It gets that variable. The next new thing I've introduced is the concept of actually figuring out what the length of something is by determining that. The websites I got this information from, I've actually added to the site. This is the information where I got how to determine what the length of something is. And this website here, if you read it, just here, it'll explain how the get method works. There's also some sections on after hours programming that goes in and explains about length as well. So there's your references for this little tutorial. The next task would be, how do I print this information? How do I print this list out back to the GUI, and how can I do some sort of mathematical formulation on it